He's a great speaker, great Islamic scholar. He has written also a book that he is going to show it to you. So without further details, I would like to welcome to the podium Sheikh Abdul Azeez.
No, no, no. No, it's fine. It's fine. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. You guys are welcome to grab some tea and get cozy and warm. Inshallah, I think it's going to make the experience even better. So please help yourselves. I'm not going to take any offense. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I begin in the name of Almighty Allah. I invoke His peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His blessings upon the Prophet's family. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His blessings upon the companions and those who walk in their footsteps. And I ask Allah to make us among them. Ameen. Brothers and sisters, Jazakallah khair for inviting me. It's been, I think, since before the pandemic that I have not been in the Bay Area. And so I'm definitely excited and honored to be here with friends and brothers and sisters that I've known for years. I also wanted to thank Imam Tahir, for his incredible friendship over the years. He invited me, but I think he has some kind of wedding, emergency wedding, whatever that is. And he had to fly to Canada, I think, tonight. So you know how it is with those imams, right? Just all over the place. So please remember him in your dua. He's a good guy, mashallah, and has done so much to this community and other communities as well. I also wanted to thank the leaders here at SBIA for inviting me to speak about a topic that is really near and dear to me personally. So tonight, inshallah, it'll be a little bit unfiltered. I'll speak from the heart, shoot from the hip, whatever they call it. Because this hits home for me, and I think it does for most of us here. So here goes, inshallah ta'ala. I'm gonna go ahead and get started right away. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us in the Quran, there's a particular ayah, and I think it sums up the responsibility of parenting for all of us. How many people here consider themselves to be parents? Wow, that's most of us, right? How many of us plan to become parents, inshallah ta'ala, one day? Yeah, that's the rest. How many people are sociopaths? See, not a single hand, right? So we're either parents or inshallah ta'ala we plan to become parents. And so there's an ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sums up the responsibility of parenting. Okay, if you ask the average parent, what's your job? Some people will say, well, my job is to put food in their bellies. My job is to put clothes on their backs or roof over their heads. My job is to send them to Stanford. My job is to get them married. All of that is important, but it's not the primary job of a parent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. O you who believe, protect yourselves first and foremost, and your families from the fire of hell. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His protection. It would not make any sense. I think, in fact, it would be the absolute most difficult moment of your existence if you're standing by the gates of Jannah and you're missing some of your children. You're looking right and you're looking left and they're not there to be with you in that moment as you celebrate. So I think of myself, as a father, and alhamdulillah, I have 3 children. 2 of them are grown. One of them is still a teenager. I think that my job is primarily to protect them. Okay? And a lot of people protect their kids from hunger. They protect their kids from poverty. They protect their kids from, muggers. They protect their kids from whatever outside scary forces around us. But you have to protect their hearts, and you have to protect their faith, and you have to protect their akhirah as well, right? That's our job as parents. And when I was a kid, and the Shaykh at our masjid used to tell us the hadith, يأتي على أمتي زمان يكون القابض فيه على دينه كالقابض على جمر من نار. A time will come for this ummah when people who hold on tight to their faith, it's as if they're holding on to a little flame of fire in the fist of their hands. And I never understood what he meant by that. Because, I was a kid, I grew up in a Muslim country, masjid was around the corner. Most of my acquaintances and my friends were very religious people. My parents were religious. I had 3 or 4 shuyukh that I studied with. Life was good. I never understood what it means to be holding on tight to your faith until I saw my kids going through their teenage years. And that's when I realized what it meant for someone to have received nurture and love, Islamic education, care at home. Both parents are devout Muslims, and the minute they go out there in society, they are faced with this challenge every single day. Do I choose dunya or do I choose akhirah? Every day they face those challenges, right? I was sitting in my office one of those days, and a lady showed up with no appointment. And I try to make sure that counseling sessions are done by appointment only. Otherwise, I'll be doing counseling 9 hours a day. Okay? And so this sister showed up, and something in my heart, told me that I needed to actually talk to her and let her in. So I asked the office manager, just let her in. I want to talk to her. So she comes sobbing, and she tells me about her son. Okay? This is a kid that grew up in the masjid, Sunday school, memorized half the Quran, good on his deen, right? Hamamatul masjid, from the hadith, the little pigeon of the masjid. These kids are just running around every single day in the masjid. You're like, man, these kids even have homes? Did you guys have parents? Like, who is this kid's dad, right? Like, you see these kids around the masjid all the time, years after years after years, okay? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always keep the beautiful, delightful voice of our children in the masajid. Allahumma ameen. And may the little noise that the kids make never cease to exist from our masajid. Because a masjid that does not have kids making noise in the background is a masjid that is bent on destructing itself. This is a masjid that is going through extinction. Because it is those kids, inshallah ta'ala, that one day, by the way, I always tell my community, you can tell the kids that don't come to the masjid ever. Those are the rowdiest kids. But the solution is not to stop bringing them to the masjid. The solution is to bring them more frequently. And you see the level of rowdiness kind of, scales down over the weeks and the months because they start learning the adab and the etiquette of being in Allah's house. The solution is not for us to frown and to be upset, as elders. Oh my God, control your kids. And all these things that we say to hurt parents and discourage them from bringing their kids to the masjid. Never do that. Have sabr in your salah. It's okay. The kids are running around collecting all the cell phones, right? Collecting all the sunglasses, putting them in their pockets. It's okay. Taking all the keychains, making noise in the back. This is a sign of health. It's a sign of health in your masjid if that happens. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that these kids in a couple of years, they'll become, the beautiful birds, the pigeons that are flying in the masjid, right? So this kid was one of them. Grew up in this Muslim family, homeschooled, right? They protected him from everything. And I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to speak from the heart tonight. I'm going to say things that will shock you, all right? This kid, literally, 2 months into college, 2 months, he gets to know, of course, this whole world that was kept from him, this entire existence. He realized that his parents lied. Life at home and at the masjid, this is not how the world is. No TV, no internet at home. Totally sheltered. Goes to college. 2 months. And then the sister came to me and she said, my son decided to become a transgender woman. 2 months. And lost his faith and became atheist. And I still remember her words, resonating in my head. She used these words, and I quote, I lost my son to the wolves. I lost my son to the wolves. As parents, when we used to have little kids, what is a parent's worst fear? It's for you to be at the department store and your kid disappears, right? At the mall, kid disappears. I was in Dubai, about 10 years ago. My son Adam MashaAllah, he's 17, just turned 17 a couple of years ago, a couple of days ago. 10 years ago, we were in Dubai, and then he disappeared in a mall for an hour and a half. Hour and a half, right? You disagree with the Emiratis on everything, but security at the mall is awesome, right? You know, they would never let a kid out of the mall. So, you know, we kept looking and looking and looking, and someone said, you know, go to the entrance. And we go to all the entrances, and we found like one of the security guards, have him next to him, gave him some candy. Was this really nice Bengali guy? Gave him candy and, you know, just took care of him, right? That's a parent's worst fear, is to lose your son or lose your child, okay? You know what's worse than that? It's for the wolves to come and snatch your kid from under your hands and serve him for dinner. That is going to be a lot worse. It's for you as a parent to think that my job was to protect my kids and I failed miserably. And my kid was taken away from me because I did not do enough at home. So that resonated in my head. I was, you know, some counseling sessions for us, imams, we need to be a little bit, you know, distant. If I am way too emotionally involved with every counseling session, I'll be miserable 24/7 because you let the negative emotions internalize. And if I'm way too distant and completely disconnected, then I'm being insensitive, right? I'm being callous. You know, the imam doesn't care. So I have to walk this very fine line where I do care, but I don't care too much. Otherwise, it start affecting my own life, okay? But wallahi, brothers and sisters, that session, I was miserable for a week. I was miserable for a week. And then I'm sitting on the dinner table, you know, just sitting there kind of like thinking about what happened a week later. And my daughter, Zainab, who was, you know, at that time, I told you, I'm gonna share with you stuff from my own private life because this is the premise of the book that I had to write. This is super personal, okay? This is not some intellectual exercise for me. This is something that I had to deal with personally, with my own children, right? A week after the wolf story, my daughter comes on the dinner table and we're done. Dad, I want to talk to you about something. I mean, what's the worst that could it be? You know, kids have things to tell, okay? So my wife is removing all the food and, you know, the plates and the pots and everything from the table, and my daughter just sat there. Dad, I was talking to one of my friends at college today, and, you know, she said certain things about God, and it made a lot of sense to me. So I was like, wait, you know, just like a Christian friend of yours? Was this like Jehovah's Witness? Like, was it the Mormons saying things about God? She said, actually, no, it's the opposite. She was an atheist, and she established to me, and she used these words, established to me that God doesn't exist. What do you think? Wallahi, brothers and sisters, you know when you're having a heart attack, but you're pretending to be okay, right? My heart just sank, and I'm just sitting there like, you know, the beads of sweat. But I'm just like, you know, playing it cool. I was like, huh, interesting. What kind of friend is that? You know, how long have you known them? Well, you know, just, you know, since the semester started. Really good person, supportive, right? Non-judgmental, very nice, very open, very inclusive, okay? They have to be like this, right? They have to be super inclusive and super compassionate and super loving, just so that the fitna becomes even worse and more difficult. SubhanAllah. If they were difficult and judgmental and edgy, it would have been easy. These are bad people. But sometimes they're the best people, right? So nice, you know, supportive. So I said, okay, interesting. So what did she say? What did she say about God? She said that the universe could exist perfectly fine without God. We don't need God. So I was like, interesting. So she's saying that the universe caused itself to exist? Oh, and she just said that the universe has been around forever, and it doesn't matter. The universe does not need God. Okay. How many of you would think that the universe has been around forever? See, like by nature, because we're people of faith, we believe that the universe was caused. All right. So I sat there and I was like, okay, how do I do this? Trying to be calm, you know. There is fire in my heart, but I'm trying to be calm. So I said, there is a moment that we are in right now. Okay? She said, yes. This moment is preceded by another moment that caused the current moment. She said, yes. And there's a moment yesterday that caused the moment of today. She said, yes. And there's a moment the day before that caused the moment of today. All right? If time goes back infinitely, then where was the initial event that caused every other event to exist? And I'm just saying this, and I did not know that there's a philosophical term for this. It's called, infinite regression of causes is impossible. Okay, write this down if you're taking any notes. This is what you need to be researching. The infinite regression of causes is impossible. There has to be a starting event. And I removed everything from the table. All right? I removed everything from the table. And I asked her to close her eyes. And then I took a spoon and I put it on the table. And I asked her to open her eyes. Zainab, what do you see on the table? She said, I see a spoon. Okay? Close your eyes again. I removed the spoon. Put it on the kitchen counter. Open your eyes. What do you see? Nothing. Just an empty table. You automatically assume, when you have seen a spoon and now there's no spoon, you automatically assume what? That someone must have removed the spoon. And before that, someone must have put the spoon on the table. Okay? So, show me one event in the entire universe that is not caused by something else. So she kept thinking, everything was caused by something. Everything is, as they say, as philosophers say, contingent upon something else. Every event, every object is contingent, depends on its existence, in its existence on something else. Show me, Zainab, one thing in the entire universe that caused itself, that is not caused by anything else. She said, "Mom, I can't really think of anything." So I told her, well, what is the universe? She said, the universe is the world. I said, no, the universe is just a made-up word for all the contingent things. The universe is the projection of the mind upon reality. The chair and the table and the human being and the frog and the mountain and the star and the galaxy, these are all components. When we put them all together, we call it what? We call it the universe, right? Everything that exists. If everything in the universe was caused, then what do you think happened to the universe itself? She's like, And I started seeing doubt in her face about what the girl said. And she said, actually, that's a pretty good point. If the universe is caused, then we have to ask ourselves, who caused it? Otherwise, it caused itself, and that would not make any sense. All right, Zainab, it's okay. Just, think about it. And I'm being super dismissive, acting cool. Think about it. And then we just had some sweets and watched a little TV. And then I went to my room. It's just, like the movies, when you're acting super cool and you go into your bedroom and you close the door. And oh my God. I swear to God, that's exactly what happened to me. And my wife was standing there and I just almost nearly had a nervous breakdown. And I was like, I can't believe that I actually pulled this off. I preserved the concept of God in my daughter's heart tonight. Okay. Now, alhamdulillah, Zainab is hijabi, she's at the masjid, she's super involved. And she tells everyone, I was saved by a spoon. That has become her story. My faith was saved by a spoon, right? So that's a great conversation starter. Oh my God, tell me the story. And this is how she starts talking to people about faith. So I went through these dinner table conversations with my daughter for months and months and months. My other kids are listening very, very attentively, right? Until, alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, I started seeing, very positive change in her and so forth. She maintained her prayers because, she wasn't sure. And she maintained the appearances. Bismillah. Someone really doesn't like what we're saying right now. Bismillah. Was that one of the kids? I told you. These are the kids you want to have around the masjid, by the way. Wallahi, I'm not even joking. These mischievous kids, they become the leaders of the future. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them. So, anyway, I went through everything with my daughter, and then at some point, alhamdulillah, her faith is very, very strong. But the point is, I started encouraging this type of debate at home. And I started having conversations with the kids about everything. Nothing was off the table. And then the whole rise of the LGBTQ movement started kind of imposing itself on our conversations as well. And Lord Almighty, the amount of conversations that we've had at home about this was absolutely extensive. Now, alhamdulillah, I could say with comfort and ease that my kids, alhamdulillah, are out of the bottleneck. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every single one of you to feel that at some point or the other. To feel that your kids, alhamdulillah, they're out of the water, right? With Allah's grace subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this is also a very emotional exercise for me because it took a massive toll on me over like 2 years. And I think it was particularly difficult because I have, even though all of my shuyukh were Shafi'is and Ash'aris and so forth, my shuyukh believed in using reason and logic, to defend the concept of God. And, the writings of Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari, Maqalatul Islamiyin, and all these books that became the foundation, of philosophical argumentation and ilm al-kalam in the Islamic tradition. I actually grew up leaning more towards Ibn Taymiyyah's views on Aqidah in particular. And that is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is nur that lights in the heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not something that can be proven by logic and reason. It's something that is felt. It's something that is discovered. Ibn Taymiyyah, by the way, even though he was opposed to philosophical argumentation, I think that he weaved some of the most incredible foundations of Islamic philosophy in his writings. And so I grew up opposed to the idea of making God into a necessity, because I found joy in the choice of faith. When you make God into a necessity, like the table and the chair, like a truth, a fact that cannot be disputed, you've taken the fun out of faith, right? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us becomes like the table and the chair. It's there. I know it's there. God is there. I know He's there. This is not. Faith requires a leap. Faith requires a choice. Faith is voluntary action. Is you saying, you know what? The idea of God is not only plausible, the idea of God is very, very likely. And that is more than enough for someone to have faith and to say, I choose God. The Ash'aris and the Maturidis, they want the necessity. They want the undisputed evidence of God. So I grew up not liking that, train of thought as much, but I found myself using Ash'ari methodologies with my kids all the time. And then, so I go to Sheikh Muhammad Kamil. I don't know if you guys know him. One of the foremost scholars in Sacramento, and my Sheikh, so I go to him and say, Sheikh, I feel like weird. I feel a little bit hypocritical because I'm using Ash'ari ideas, but then, I am, in my Aqidah, I'm kind of more of on the Salafi side, right? And I mean Salafi, by the way, in its essential, ancient, academic sense, not in the sense that we use it today, right? Because Salafi today is kind of like, it's an attack on someone, right? So I use it in its very academic sense. So he said to me, Ibn Taymiyyah and his work start when people are already solid in their faith. But those who are on the margins and those who need to be brought into the fold, maybe you can use Ash'ari work and Ash'ari methodology to bring them in. And once you've brought them in, then it becomes a matter of taking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on faith, right? My daughter then came to me and she said that this was really an incredible journey. You need to write about this, because imagine other people out there that, whose faith could be saved. I was like, right? Oh my God. I don't have a 5 minutes in the day to write anything. I barely write my tasks for the following day. What do you mean write? Because that's what imams are, right? It's just the putting out fires. When someone asks me, what do you do most of the day? I tell them I'm putting out fires. That's what imams do. Managing crises, managing trouble and problems in the Muslim community, right? Very little time, for us to study and learn and read and grow and do our own spiritual stuff. Very, very difficult. And then you plop in your bed at the end of the day like a dead person. Barely wake up for Fajr. You drag your feet because you're so tired and exhausted physically and mentally, right? Imams are not superhumans, right? I wish that there is a therapy service that imams can sign up for, because everyone comes to them, dumps the negative energy, right? Seeks that help, but where would imams go? They just talk to each other. You'd be shocked to see the kinds of things that imams say to each other behind back doors, right? It's a lot of, and they complain that imams are foodies, right? What else are you going to do? This is how you manage the negative energy, just to enjoy food, right? So there's a reason why imams love food. That's my theory, at least. So she said, "Hey, you need to write a book." It's like, how am I get time to write a book? So I was in Istanbul, like about 6 months later, and I met some brothers over there. It was a trip where we were invited actually to Istanbul by the Turkish government, and I met some brothers from a publishing company. It's called Claritas. And how many of you know Maher Zain and Awakening? So the owners of Awakening are the owners of Claritas. It's the same people, right? And so they were on the trip, and they both came to me and they said, "We've been following your lectures and your YouTube channel and your khatiras in Ramadan. You need to write." So I said, "And if I wrote, will you publish?" He said, "Yes. We can't promise you, but the project has to be worthy. But if it is, you have my word, we'll publish it." And then my daughter's words resonated in my head. She asked me to write. What if I just start? Let's see if I can put a chapter together. So I started playing this trick that really worked. And wallahi, brothers and sisters, I'm telling you, if you have original ideas and you're intimidated by writing a book, it's a lot easier than you think, okay? All I did was I took my laptop with me everywhere I went. One day would pass and I don't get a chance to write at all. But another day, I'll be waiting at my doctor's office. And I have 7 minutes before I see the doctor. So what do? Take the laptop out and I do one paragraph. And then I put the laptop back, right? The following day, I'm at the car dealership. My car is getting fixed and I have an hour. What do? Take the laptop out, 2 paragraphs. I'd be at my brother's house waiting for my sister-in-law to make dinner, right? And she's fixing the dinner table and everything. And I have like literally 7-8 minutes before I eat. And then I write 1 paragraph. Within like 2 weeks, I finished 1 chapter. I was like, wait a second. This is not bad. And then I went another chapter and another chapter and another chapter. And then within 1 year, I finished the book. So I submitted the draft to the Claritas boys. And, again, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants something to work, they send you the signs right away. So I get a response on WhatsApp 5 minutes later, and it says, "Finally!" exclamation mark. They did not even read the manuscript. They just said, "Finally." And then I said, "Jazakallah khair for your support. Please read it. Let me know if this is worthy of publication." It took like about 2 months before I received another message. And you know what? I did not bother them. I was like, if Allah wants it to work, it'll work. So they sent me a message 2 months later. "We have some comments about a few chapters. Can we have a Google Meet or a Zoom call, whatever?" So I said, "Absolutely." When? He says, "Sunday." So I sat there at Pete's Coffee with these brothers on a Sunday, and from London, they're telling me, "Hey, adjust this, remove that. This paragraph didn't make sense. Rewrite this." Took me another 2.5 months to work on the draft, and I submitted draft number 2. Their editorial board sent me some comments. Weirdest comment was, "You need to redo the whole thing in British English." So I was like trying to figure out how to do that on Google Docs, right? How to redo this whole thing in British English and all of that. And alhamdulillah, I figured it out, and then I redone the whole thing in British English, and then I submitted it. And that's when they said, "It's good to go. You just need to wait for a date for the publication." And alhamdulillah, from that date, it took about 1.5 years for me to hold a copy in my hands, right? That's the story of the book. And it encouraged me so much that thus far, I've submitted a manuscript for the 2nd book, and I'm almost done with the 3rd, and they approved it without even looking at any of the details. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So by the summer of next year, I will have, inshallah ta'ala, with Allah's grace, 3 books that I have authored, again, based on my own experience and the things that I've done with the community. I wanted to share with you some stats because, I don't want you to think this problem affects everybody else, but it's not going to affect my family and my kids, all right? Everyone knows what Gen Z is, right? You know what Gen Z is? All right? Gen Z? Raise your hand if you know what Generation Z is. Some of the brothers like, Gen Z, is this like Pakistani food? You know what Generation Z is? What is Generation Z? Anyone wants to define Generation Z? Those who are born in the 2000s, right? 1/5 of Generation Z, according to statistics, identifies as unaffiliated. You know what that means? They don't follow any of the religions, okay? Most of the unaffiliated is essentially atheist, all right? It's just euphemism for atheist, all right? But here's the kicker. Also, 1/5 of Generation Z identifies with the LGBTQ community. 1/5. Which means that 1 out of every 5 members of that generation is both atheist and identifies with the LGBTQ community. Okay? What is the percentage of American Muslims that identifies as converts? Anyone wants to guess? Percentage. 5, 10, 15? 24%. The Pew Research shows that when you sample the Muslim community in America, about 24% of us will say that they've converted to Islam. Amazing, right? How many of us actually leave Islam on an annual basis? Muslims that grew up in Muslim households and they reached adulthood, meaning that they passed 18 and then they decided to renounce Islam. What's the percentage? 23%. Thank you. We gain every year 24% of our numbers, and we lose almost the same number every single year, so it's a wash. The Muslim community in America is almost not growing because the number of people that come is equivalent to the number of people that leave. That's pretty frightening, okay? It could get worse, by the way, if we start bleeding more people than the people are converting. And here's the thing. People that leave Islam are kids that grew up in Muslim households raised by Muslim parents. These are not converts that decided to leave Islam. They're kids whose parents are born Muslim. Those kids are born Muslim. So the savagery of the statistics is a lot worse when you think about it. Subhanallah. By the way, what does that tell you? If you have 100 kids, I mentioned that to, some of the students in my halaqah, and I told them, because many of them are Sunday school teachers, I told them, if you have 100 kids enrolled in Sunday school, I just want you to imagine that you're looking at those kids and you know that 24 out of 100 are going to become atheists one day. See how frightening that is? You see how frightening that is? All these beautiful kids coming to Sunday school, right? Filling the masjid with energy. I just want you to imagine for a second that you're going to lose 24 of every 100. 48 of every 200. That's almost 50 kids. The average Sunday school here, MCA or SBIA is how many kids? A lot more than 200, I can tell you that. Right? So imagine if you have 300 kids enrolled in Sunday school, it is possible that you're going to lose 75 of them. See how frightening that is? Okay? This is hitting us all at home. This is not something, that's happening out there in the world. It's something that is at our doorstep already, brothers and sisters. And I wanted to say that, atheism is not always very blatant. It's not always, you go to college and the atheism club, they have a little da'wah table, right, with all of their brochures telling you this is why God doesn't exist. No. The vast majority of the time, it's not so in your face like this. There is atheism, and then there's atheistic culture. Our culture in America has become an atheistic culture. It's a culture that removes God already from everything and ultimately makes God a dismissible thought. God is not important. I want you to examine the amount of death and darkness and despair in popular American songs today. It's mind-boggling how depressing the lyrics have become. All about purposelessness, all about aimlessness, lack of meaning, lack of direction. We're all just tiny little particles being thrown around by nothing. Okay? You see that culture of atheism infused in popular culture. You see it infused in the movies. You see it infused in soap operas, infused in TV shows. You see it infused in social media. around you, it's everywhere. And it starts determining everything. Why is there such a massive mental health crisis in America today? Because God essentially died in their hearts already, even if they're still going to church. God for them is dead. Practically dead. There is some tiny little rope of faith that they're holding on tight to, but practically speaking, God is already gone in their minds. There's nothing. There's nothing to live for. There's nothing to wake up in the morning for. There is nothing to fight for. I keep thinking to myself, as Muslims, when we have a really bad day, and we are religious, devout people, what do? We pray, right? Oh my God, it's Isha. I really need to do my salah. Rain or shine, I'll do my salah, right? And then when you do your salah, you make dua, maybe you cry a little bit in your sujood. You ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for relief. Feel a little bit better, right? You listen to, your favorite qari on the way home from work. You feel a little bit better. You come to Jum'ah and the Imam, mashallah, suddenly uses the right hadith and it hits the right button and suddenly you feel inspired. Oh man, the Imam is as if he was talking to me today. How often do you hear that? Right? Because you need that faith to help you recover. Okay? Or if you have a really bad year, what do? You got to go to Umrah. Right? Got to go to Umrah. I've been having a really, really bad year. I have really. My eyes, I just miss the Kaaba so much. I have to be there. I have to be in the Masjid Nabawi. I have to be there for Fajr. Right? I want you to imagine if someone took all that away from you. You have no recourse. You have no process to mitigate your pain. You have no meaning. You have nothing to look forward to. Even if life, your entire journey was so bad and so difficult, you say what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will level the fields on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Maybe some of the zalimeen, they will live and they will die with their dhulm, and they were not crushed by God. And some of the madlumeen, they will live in oppression and die in oppression. But at the end of the day, your heart tells you Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it all right one day. If not in this dunya, I will take what is mine on the day of judgment when I stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and complain to my Lord. Imagine that they've taken that away from you. You have nothing to live for, not for the hour or for the day or the month or the year, and your entire life means absolutely nothing. You're dancing the line of suicide every single day. Do I need to live or do I need to take my own life? What's the point? There's no point. Oh, my mom wants me to help her with this, upcoming procedure. Okay, I'm going to live an extra 2 weeks. My spouse really depends on me. It's going to totally suck if I killed myself right now. My kids are still a little bit young. You know what? I can wait until they graduate high school. Literally, you're looking for reasons to live. Because if they have extinguished the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from your heart, nothing is left. This is how dangerous and destructive atheism is. And here's the thing. I've had my own faith issues growing up. But the more I studied, and the more I got involved in Islamic philosophy, and the more I've looked at what the scholars have said, the more I've read the Ash'aris, and the more I've read Imam Maturidi, and the more I've studied Juwayni, and the more I've studied Ibn Taymiyyah, you kind of collect, this plethora of knowledge over the years. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, every single argument against God has already been addressed. Every single refutation of God's existence has already been addressed and crushed. Atheism is an industry. It's an industry that thrives and it wants to thrive. It preaches like religion. Atheism replaces one metaphysics with another metaphysics. You replace the idea, I believe in God, with the idea, I don't believe in God. Both essentially are what? Both are faith. Both are a religion. The religion of atheism is not the absence of faith. The religion of atheism, it's an alternative. It's a different type of faith. That is essentially what it is. Now, with all of this happening in the world around us, what is happening in our masajid? Are we equipped for this fight? We are in so much trouble. We're in so much trouble. I just want you to study what the Imams teach and preach. Look at the subject matter addressed at the programs and the seminars and the workshops at the masajid. Right? Look at the conversations that happen at the masjid. These high school kids, they have all the temptations in the world. The girls and the boys are throwing themselves on them. They're being invited to explore all forms of sexuality and lusts and pleasure out there in the world. They're being invited to do drugs. They're being invited to, practice the absolute most decadent things. They are being faced with atheism every single day. Live your life however way you want. God doesn't exist. And then when they come to the masjid, what do they see? They see masjid infighting. They see masjid politics. They see imams being mistreated. They see board fights. They see people calling the police and removing each other from the masjid. They see, is music halal or haram? Can I eat at McDonald's and In-N-Out? That's what they see. They see moon fighting. It's not moon sighting, it's moon fighting, right? I mean, things have gotten a little bit better, right? But this is what they experience at the masjid, and they gradually think, you know what? What am I doing here? My parents, they're immigrants, they're here because they have to be here. That's their culture. That's who they are. That's not me. There is nothing for me at the masjid. And what do? They're going to go find some affiliation, some group to belong to, because every human being needs something to belong to, right? You see how dangerous our situation is? We're in so much trouble, as I said to you. And I want to go through a very quick list here of things from my own experience that lead to shaking people's faith, all right? This is going to be a long list, but I'm going to go through it quickly. Number 1, being dismissive of science. When parents start saying things like, the theory of evolution, this is just fiction. Don't believe in these things. That's when your kids are going to stop taking you seriously right away. They're going to think my parents are just not sophisticated enough. They are dismissing science. This is not the way to have these conversations, all right? So you dismiss the theory of evolution, you dismiss the Big Bang, you dismiss science because you think that it is opposed to your faith. That's not the way to go, all right? They will dismiss you in a second. And I've always said this, by the way, and I say it again. If your kids think that you are intellectually inferior to them, you're dead as a parent. If your kids think they're smarter than you and they are intellectually superior to you, you're dead as a parent. You're done. If you're so far behind, in your awareness of society and culture and knowledge, you're done. Your ability to parent your children has essentially come to a halt. Number 2, the problem of evil. How could a beautiful, loving, merciful God allow for so much pain to happen in the world, including the death and the carnage of little children? This is responsible single-handedly for about 90% of the cases of atheism. And it is so simple to respond to. It is the easiest one to respond to. But it looks at face value so powerful. Yeah, that's right. If there's a God, why is he allowing for all these terrible things to happen in the world, right? Sexual deviations. Naturally, when people want to become transgender or, become homosexual or whatever, they know that that is not accepted in their faiths. You know what? If God says that I cannot be myself, then I reject that God. There's no such thing. God is a fiction. It becomes very easy for people to dismiss faith on sexual grounds. Like I said earlier, another factor is the irrelevance of religious teachings. Religious teachings are not relevant to their lives. They're not helping them answer their own questions on a day-to-day basis, right? The other one is phones and social media. Why social media? Because social media is essentially designed to disconnect you from your natural support system. It's designed by definition to keep you engaged for as long as possible. And social media algorithms have become so effective that they will literally gauge how many extra fraction of a second you're spending on one particular post in order to do what? To feed you more of that same stuff. So you get caught up in desire. You get caught up in your own preferences. You get caught up in your own wild fantasies. And social media, the more it does this, it disconnects you from reality, it disconnects you from masjid, from family, from your natural support system, puts you in a little chamber where you're only hearing your own voice. This is how you lose your faith. The next point is the unrestrained flood of information. A lot of people may not think of this one. Okay? The human mind is not designed to be exposed to too much information every single day. A flood in China, an earthquake in Iran, people that died in mass shootings in Minnesota. Oh my God. Our minds are not designed to receive so much information. Okay? In fact, all the traditional institutions were designed to restrict the flow of information, right? To restrict the flow of unhealthy information. Take, for example, our parents. What did they tell us when we were little kids? We can talk about these things, but we cannot talk about these other things. This subject is only for adults. You can't read this book. You can't watch this movie, right? Remember when parents were actually parents? And they used to follow the guidelines. Oh, this is PG-13. You're 11. You can't. Okay. You know how it is today, though. PG-13 and R, they're all the same. They're putting you the poison in the honey. Even little harmless, innocuous cartoon movies for 5-year-olds. Putting the seeds in there. And those seeds just take a few years to blossom. And now you accept these new realities. Right? You know, when we were maybe like 20 years ago, they would slip in the movies these effeminate male characters. You know what I'm talking about? When we grew older and we look at those, rewatch the movies from the mid-90s, it's like, oh my God, how did I not notice this? The movie is filled with homosexual themes. But at the time, it just looked like, oh, this male character, they're just acting like a girl, not a big deal. But they were preparing our minds so that when we turn 25 and 30, we perfectly accept it because it just becomes part of your upbringing, right? So the mind is not designed for the flood of information. My advice to you, stay off social media as much as possible. Be intentional in your usage of social media, all right? With every electronic device, in fact, with every device in general, we're always very intentional. We ask ourselves, what do I need this device for? I get in my car, I need to have a destination. I don't get in my car and drive randomly. It seems that the only technology where we engage with without any intentionality whatsoever is social media. Because going through posts and the perpetual surfing is an end in and of itself. So when you go on social media, ask yourself, what am I doing on YouTube? There is a lecture for Sheikh Yasir Qadi that I need to listen, that someone sent me. There's this particular video that I need to watch. I need to reshare the post from the event at the masjid. Do your job, get out of social media. I don't have any apps of social media on my phone. I have it on my computer. And I only go when I need to. And I am always logged out. So half the time, I go on Facebook because I'm just sitting in my office bored. And I go on Facebook, I realize that I'm logged out. And I'm like, oh man, astaghfirullah. Have some shame, and I stop. Unless I really need to post something, that's when I go and I log in and I make it more difficult for myself. Definitely remove it from your phone and have it on one computer, not on every single device. Okay, this is how they get you. Tablet, computer, laptop, all of it. This is how they get you. Remove it and leave it on only one device and go intentionally when you absolutely need to. Don't keep watching the news and following Twitter and all the horrific events that are happening in the world. The mind is not designed for this, all right? Emphasis on STEM. Oh man, this is my favorite. Emphasis on STEM, science and engineering with our kids. That's all we want. We want our kids to be scientific, to do math, to do physics, to go to engineering schools and stuff like that. And what is lost in the process? The humanities, history, social sciences, philosophy, the very tools that they're actually going to need to realize that there's more to the world than hard materialism. Science prepares the mind to handle the material. It's a useful tool. but it cannot be the only thing that we use. The mind needs rhetoric. The mind needs liberal arts. The mind needs history, needs poetry, right? We need art. This is how you realize that there's more to the world than material things. Faith is eroded when all you have is just material sciences. So you have to be very, very careful with this. Last but not least, atheism thrives in an environment where history is taught as facts and not lessons. What does that mean? One of the things that I've always wondered about when I was younger, when I was still in grad school, is why is it that Christian Europe, after Constantine, so you're talking about 300 after Christ, about 300 years before the Prophet ﷺ, why did Christian Europe continue to teach Greek mythology? Right? The Odyssey and Homer and the gods of the Olympus and stuff like that. Isn't that considered shirk for monotheists? Why did they keep teaching Greek mythology even in Christian times in Christian schools? And then it suddenly dawned on me. They don't teach it because of the aqidah in it. They teach it because of the lessons. Because these are timeless, incredible lessons. All right? Now, in modern times, modern academia made it where we have to teach history based on fact. Napoleon went to this city on that date, on this year, and he killed 17 people, and he did this and that. History has just become an exposition of fact. Did you learn anything? Nothing. Islamic scholars were actually so ahead of their times, because when it came to hadith, they were very careful with the authentication. But when it came to the documentation of history, they were a lot looser. They would allow, sort of like all these kinds of stories to be included in seerah because they were instructive, because they were important, they were moral, they taught people something. So I would rather that we teach people history that is not true as long as they learn lessons from it, than to teach them history that is absolutely factual, jazakallah khair, but they're not really gaining anything from it. And let me inshallah wrap it up here. About the book itself, event tonight is not a promotion by the way of this book. I just wanted to make sure, because the Bay Area literally is the only place away from Sacramento that I visit occasionally. So I wanted to make sure that this is an extension of my own community, and I wanted to make sure that you know that this resource does exist and that you are able to use it inshallah when you need to. So you don't need to go on Amazon and buy the book right now, but you just need to know that the book is there. If you've ever needed it, the resource is available. All right. So the premise of the book is simple. I've always been inspired by Socrates. I've loved his faith, his love for God, and some Muslim scholars actually believe that Socrates was the prophet for the Greek people, which is really interesting. His student Plato wanted to eternalize the teachings of his own teacher, so he wrote this incredible book that is called Plato's Republic. If you guys are familiar with that book, this is a very important classical work. I studied it when I was in grad school. So in Plato's Republic, Plato creates fictional conversations between his teacher Socrates and random people in the community that come ask Socrates questions about justice and God and so forth. And through his own words, he tries to emphasize the spirit of Socrates' teachings and so forth. So when I decided to write this book, I wanted to model it after Plato's Republic. So instead of writing prose paragraph after paragraph, make it dry, inaccessible, I decided to create a conversation. So it's basically a dialogue between a fictional imam, not me particularly, a fictional imam and a fictional member of the community whose nephew lost his faith. The man is very furious, so he comes to the imam seeking guidance, and the imam talks to the uncle, and the uncle goes and talks to the nephew. And at the very end of the book, all the arguments for God have been covered, and the nephew requests to meet with the imam. And I leave it on a cliffhanger, so to speak, because I don't want to give people false hope either. Oh my God, you just follow these steps and read the book, all the atheists will come into the fold of Islam. It doesn't work this way, right? You have to invest, and it takes time. And at the end of the day, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. You don't guide those whom you love. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide their hearts if He so wills. All right. My desire, hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, with our local community, I'm not interested in making big changes in the world. Just the community where I'm raising my kids. That's what matters to me, right? So Northern California is my community. And I'm hoping, inshallah ta'ala, that we're going to be able to create a generation whose faith is fortified against the arguments of atheism, so that acts of worship become meaningful. When you recite the Quran, you cry, it's meaningful. When you make your sujood, it's meaningful. When you see the Kaaba and you get emotional, it's meaningful. If the mind is restless, you can't enjoy your acts of worship, because the idea of losing your faith looms over your head. So I want to help fortify this generation, inshallah ta'ala, so that their faith is strong enough and they're able to face the threat of atheism out there. And here's the thing, and I will end with this thought. There is so much thirst for religion in America today. Judaism has exhausted its purposes and has unfortunately involved itself in the worst upper tide that history had ever seen. Christianity has technically and essentially exhausted its purposes, with all due respect, by the way, to our peace-loving Jewish and Muslim and Christian neighbors. This is not an attack on anyone. I'm just stating, my own assessments of reality. Modern American Christianity has completely lost its purposes, because it's either that they are very liberal and they've allowed for all kinds of things that are antithetical to religion, ordaining gay pastors and anything goes, or they've become super conservative and evangelical and hateful of everyone else that is not them. Okay? Now, sooner or later, Americans are going to want to come back to spirituality. And who are they going to find? They're going to find Islam. My theory, I hope inshallah ta'ala I'm right about this, is that within the next 50 years, Americans are going to be converting to Islam en masse, with the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We just have to be ready when that day comes. If He saves someone from atheism, they're not going to go back to Judaism and Christianity. They're going to come to Islam, because that's going to become the only viable option. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it so. Jazakallah khair for your patience. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our hearts and our faith and our children. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to gather us in the highest level of Jannah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. Inshallah, I'll take some questions if you guys have any.
Okay, we'll take some questions. Number one, who goes first?
I think there's a question right
Oh.
here. Yeah, please. It doesn't matter.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question is, like, you addressed a lot of concepts related to atheism, like on college campuses and those circles. Now you find more the ideas of like perennialism, where people like were spiritual but not religious, and they do not have the problem with the first part of Aqidah, believing in God. We're like, hey, like, we believe in God, like, makes sense, but like, how do we know that this is the right way to go? And that's where they stumble. They say, hey, like, all these religions have some aspect of truth to it, so why don't we just take the like good things from all the religions?
Right.
And why do we have to go with one specific religion?
I actually do address perennialism briefly. I think in the chapter before last in the book, and I talk about the necessity of choice, and I talk about inclusivists and exclusivists. Inclusivists who say, all religions have truth in them, and why that idea does not make any sense. And I talk about exclusivism, why it doesn't make any sense either. And I even talk about the hybrid edition, which is people that think that they are in the middle between inclusivism and exclusivism. And I present a fourth path that, I believe, inshallah, leads to Islam. So you probably have to go a little bit in depth, when you take a look at the book. But that has to be addressed as well. And by the way, this particular book project focuses primarily on making a case for God, and secondarily on making a case for Islam. Like I think at some point, inshallah, I probably need to write another book project. That'll be a continuation of this. Okay, now we have God. Why do we have to choose Islam, kind of thing? Yeah. Sister?
Next.
Oh, sorry.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum.
You mentioned, or you listed very important points about the main causes, or what you identified as the main causes for atheism.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if you noticed that the absence of Arabic understanding of the Quran, like to understand it fresh. And I met some Hafiz who became, unfortunately, atheists. And when I looked into what's happening, I found that, okay, they memorized the whole Quran, but they didn't really understand it fresh. And if they wanted to understand it, they have to go and read it in some form of translation. And especially in this community, because in other, like, let's say, majority Muslim countries or Muslim countries, the person has many guards to guard him from atheism, the community, the people, the street, friends, everywhere. But when we send our kids out there, they memorize a little bit of a Quran and some hadith. And for them, they go out and they meet other people from different faiths. And then the Quran for them is just rituals. It's just songs.
Right.
It's just things that my father is saying. They sing. It sounds nice, but they don't have that God if they don't understand it. I'm not sure if you had that notice already.
So the question about the Arabic language, I tell you what I personally do. You know, everyone that studies with me, I require them to study Arabic as well, because I think that this is the key to accessing authentic Islamic knowledge. All right. So you cannot grow in your Islamic knowledge without the Arabic language. I think that's a given. Does it affect faith or not? You know, to not have access to the Arabic language, I think that is something that has to be studied quite academically. I will say, however, that there is a rise of atheism in the Arab world. There is now all kinds of discussion groups and Facebook groups, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. You know, and I speak, you know, I'm of Egyptian descent myself. I'll speak to that. You know, there's so many groups now in Egypt and other, you know, Arab countries that are entirely atheist. And they're becoming more vocal by the day. And so I think far gone are the days when we thought that, you know, growing up in a Muslim country would somehow automatically protect your faith. I think that's way behind us now. This fire is coming to everyone. The flood is, you know, we don't want to be like Nuh's son and think that the water is not going to come to our mountain, right? Because it seems like it's everywhere, and we need to get smart about this for sure.
Next.
Sister is right over there, brother. Oh, sorry, I've been trying.
Assalamualaikum. I really liked your point about how you were able to talk to your own child. But I was wondering, how do you kind of envision a community where teenagers feel comfortable in asking questions without feeling that like they wouldn't be judged? Because not a lot of kids may feel comfortable asking their parents these questions. What do you think like attracts like teenagers to those spaces? Girls and boys might be different for both.
I think it's about creating a culture, and that culture starts at home. It starts with encouraging debates and encouraging doubts, and telling the kids when they come with doubts, guys, that's perfectly normal. I feel I have doubts myself, you know, once in a while. It's okay. We're all seekers of the truth. And if you don't know the answer, tell them, you know what? Let's both of us. Actually, that's a really important question. Let's go and talk to maybe, I don't know, the imam or some learned person in the community that has knowledge to answer that question. One of the things that I've personally done, and it's replicable, but you know, I think it's not easy, is that I conducted a class. So what I've done is that I used like a three-pronged approach. I wrote the book, and I know that the book, Muslims are not readers, and I say that with respect, but it's an unfortunate truth that a lot of Muslims don't read. You know, I am an avid reader myself. You know, I always have a bunch of books next to my bed, and I have to read at least 15 minutes every single day. Otherwise, I'll feel like my brain is rusty. And so Muslims need to read, but I know that most of them don't read. So the book is not going to serve that many people. So I decided to conduct a class. And it was a year-long class, 3 semesters. And it was, I think, about 30 sessions, 2 hours each, in which I covered the entire content of the book. And that became a material that is offered actually at the Tarbiyah Seminary program. So you can sign up for it and kind of watch the videos remotely. And then, in addition to that, I decided to popularize the knowledge itself, and we created a YouTube series of 10 videos that actually address the concepts of the book, so that we expand, you know, the culture as much as possible in our own community. So I think that maybe the Bay Area probably needs to do something similar to that. These are, you know, the 3 steps that we've taken. Sister?
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaykum salam wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair for the very enlightening
Welcome.
talk. In your experience, who do you think is behind this organized effort to malign our young people?
Shaitan, sister.
So yes, but at the same time, shaitan and also our own family environment is inclusive in this.
Definitely. I mean, again, إن الشيطان لكم عدو فاتخذوه عدو. He's the enemy. Treat him as such. Sometimes we say that shaitan is the enemy, but we're doing his bidding and following in his footsteps and doing his work, right? So accept him intellectually as the enemy and then start acting accordingly that he is your enemy. And once you've accepted that, you realize that there are people who work for shaitan. There are people who are the agents of shaitan in this dunya, and they, by consequence, become our enemies as well. And I'm not saying there's a particular faith group or a particular corporation or whatever. I'm just saying anyone that does the work of shaitan becomes our enemy. But I refrain from saying that there's some kind of a conspiracy, against faith. It's just people who have lost faith, and they project that weakness on people who have faith because, misery requires a company. And they don't want to be, it's like, Lut alayhi salam, أخرجوا آل لوط من قريتكم إنهم أناس يتطهرون. These are clean people, get them out of here. They make us all look bad. So people who don't have faith, they are threatened and challenged by people who do have faith because they see their peace. And they miss that peace so much. So what's the way out? Is to extinguish your peace as well. So we're all miserable in the same abyss together, right? So.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaykum salam.
So one thing you said really resonated me. It was if your children think you're intellectually inferior to them, you're judging them as a parent. How do you, as a parent, equip yourself? This book is a start, but let's say you need to go deeper. How would you what are some steps you've done, or for the average Muslim who can't go down the scholarly route? What steps do you think they should take? Just read more books on various topics. How would you tell these parents to address their own?
That's a great question. And again, I'm not saying every parent needs to be a scholar in their own right in order to achieve that. You just cannot afford to come across as an unsophisticated person, simplistic, quick to judge, quick to make unverified and uncorroborated statements, easy to believe things, accept conspiracy theories, right? These outlandish statements that some parents make, they really end up doing them a tremendous amount of disservice, and it doesn't help, our kids. We have to be reasonable. We have to find, use logic, take it easy, process the information first, So it's a behavioral thing first and foremost, right? And once I think we've fixed the behavioral component of this, then it becomes a matter of learning, right? You have to just be on average, aware of what is happening in the world around you. When your kids say, a name of a country, and you say, I've never heard that country. There's a country that exists? Oh my God, Sacramento is the capital of California? What? I thought it was San Diego. Things like that would just make you look so stupid in front of your kids. This is the stuff that you have to avoid. And so an average amount of awareness and knowledge will get you there. You don't need to develop a PhD. But if you are so averse to learning yourself, you don't want to learn, you don't want to grow, you don't want to read, you don't want to listen to the lectures, you have no desire whatsoever to grow intellectually and spiritually, then obviously that's going to reflect in the way you treat your own kids. So we're not asking for a miracle here, we're just asking for a little effort for us to be at least a couple of steps ahead of our kids. This is I always say to my children, I will always be at least a mile ahead of you guys. And they know that. They believe it. They wholeheartedly believe it. There's no way that we're going to get this man. Right? Because I've created that illusion at home. And now they believe it. They try to corner me, I get them. And I don't lose my temper either. Right? So at home, I've made a deal with my kids. If you use logical steps and you make a strong case, I will always yield. Every single time I kept my word. 99% of the time I win. By the times they do win, I acknowledge it. And I said, you know what? You're right. We're going to change the course and I'm following your plan. That right there does wonders for the children. I think there was a hand right there and then.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much for the wonderful lecture. Small advice for my brothers and sisters that I tried with my kids. One of the ways to open them for just a discussion and to encourage them to talk about things that they have question about, I tell them, you're doing what Sayyidina Ibrahim was doing. أرني كيف تحيي الموتى.
With Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
That's something that get them to ask questions. And same thing with Sayyidina Musa when he said, أرني أنظر إليك. So things that in my mind when I grow up, you cannot ask these questions, but actually it realistically, prophets ask that questions similar to that. So it's good to open questions with the family members, and it's actually, don't disencourage them, but actually giving them stories that can help them to open.
That's a great point. I appreciate that. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum. I see a much more common, more than atheism in a community. People come to pray, they even fast and everything, much more agnostic. And this is very common, especially in college. They say, well, I am a Muslim, but I don't know. There's some kind of doubt. They believe in something, but they can't say precisely 100% this is my God or this is it. So this is very common. Even when I travel around the world, I see mostly in college level, even the universities, this is. So what do you think about this agnostic kind of thoughts?
Bismillah. Yes, I do agree that agnosticism is just as big a problem as atheism, but here's the thing. Agnosticism is actually more honest than atheism. Because agnostics, at least, they have the humility to say, I'm just withholding judgment, I don't know. Right? Atheists, on the other hand, they straight up tell you God doesn't exist. So wait a second. My faith is that God exists. Your faith is that God doesn't exist. We're just flip coins of the same thing. Right? So atheism, by definition, is the absolute most dishonest enterprise. Agnosticism is something that I'm actually willing to engage with. And so, remember what I said earlier between making God into a great plausibility versus God being a great necessity? Remember that discussion that I mentioned earlier, right? If you can show that God is a necessity, you know what, that's fine. Then at least you've addressed the problem that agnostics have. But I think what works most of the time, in my own dealings with agnostics, is that all I need to do is to not only make God into a great plausibility, but to make God into something that is very, very likely. Even if we don't establish that God is a necessity, at which point it just becomes easier and more commonsensical to follow something that is more likely than not. All right? And the rest, once you've reached that point with them in understanding, the rest just becomes the work of the heart. It becomes the work of emotions, the work of friends and support system, and who they're spending their time with and having dinner with and the type of environment that they're surrounded with. This is what is going to bring them back gradually into the faith, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
One more question. This evening, inshallah.
So it starts question.
Please.
Do we have any number for what percentage of Muslims go to either a full-time Islamic school or weekend Islamic school?
I don't know if I have those numbers myself, but if I were to guess, I would say it's a very small percentage. So I think the statistics came out about 10 years ago with the Pew Center that about 10% of American Muslims attend Salatul Eid. About 10%. So if you have 10,000 people coming to Salatul Eid, that means there's 100,000 Muslims in the city, roughly speaking. Right. Now you do the math. Out of 10,000 people who come to Salatul Eid, how many come to Taraweeh? maybe like about 1/3, I would say, 1/4 perhaps. So maybe about 2,500. And out of the 2,500 who come to, Salatul Taraweeh regularly, how many would actually come to Jum'ah regularly? Honestly, about 1,000, right? And out of the 1,000 that come to Jum'ah regularly, how many of them are devout Muslim families that actually send their kids to Sunday school? Maybe significantly less. I want to say about maybe 200 of them. And so again, these are rough numbers depending on an area of a Muslim population of about 100,000. All right. So my guess is that the percentage is very, very low. Very, very, very low.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Abdul Azeez, for your wonderful evening.
Thank you.
I hope the audience enjoyed a lot. But this, Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Please have a concluding dua.
الرحيم اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل معنا ولا بيننا شقيا ولا محروما ولا مطرودا من رحمتك أرحم الراحمين سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم العصر الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله